Welcome, everyone, to the Disruptive Jam. My name is Carrie Forbes, and I am your resident DJ. That's Disruptive Jammer, and really happy to have you join me on this podcast. It's a place where we get to talk about all of the things that surprise us, that throw us off, but also become our opportunities. So let's get started. Today, we are going to step into a really fascinating intersection between tech, finance, human potential. And my guest that I'm thrilled to have is none other than Theodora Lau. So let me tell you a little bit about Theo. She's the founder of Unconventional Ventures, and she's reshaping the way we think about financial innovation by focusing on, I love this, the forgotten demographics, and thinking about pathways for underrepresented founders. She's also been recognized as one of American Banker's top 20 most influential women in fintech. She also hosts the One Vision podcast. And also, she is the author of multiple books, including her recent book, just released, and it's an excellent read, Banking on Artificial Intelligence. So what I love, and we're going to talk about this today, is how you can challenge the industry to look beyond what we call the algorithms and the humans that they serve. So we're calling today Beyond the Binary. You know, my shtick is music, but like a musician who gets both digital production and the analog warmth, we're going to get into a little of that. So welcome, Theo, to the Disruptive Jam. So excited to have you.
Thank you so much, Carrie. Thanks for having me.
So what I do want to get into before we dive in, especially for some of our listeners who really don't have a good sense of what fintech is, maybe what you do or the industry, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what it is that you're doing.
Oh my, where do we start? The short version I always tell people is I ask questions and I get myself into trouble. That is the short version of it. The long version of it, I am not from banking. That's always the caveat I tell people. I came from tech. I'm a techie at heart. Always will be. Can't change me. I look at financial services as a parallel industry to the industry I came from, which has spent 20 years in telco. And is heavily regulated. It needs a lot of data. It needs a lot of insights from the data we can make use to help people. When I look at movement of money, we look at financial services. There are two words. We always think about money. We forgot the service part. At the end of the day, is an industry that help people get to where they need. Just like the analogy that a lot of our friends would like to use, you don't go into a bank to ask for a mortgage. You go into a bank to say, I want to buy a house. What can you do? So that should be our business, is what do you need and how can we serve?
It's, when you put it that way, it sounds so obvious, but it's amazing how challenging we've made it so complex. And I think technology has made that even worse, even though at times it was meant to help simplify things. So let me ask you this. One of the things that you said one time, and it sort of inspired the theme of this, was you said, I've always been between the ones and the zeros, right, in your background and all of the things that you've done. So when you think about your thoughts on financial services, what's between the ones and the zeros that inspired you towards the group, the demographics that are forgotten?
Yes, I am always ones and zeros. That's my background. That's been my background. And I was born and raised in Hong Kong. And so our school system back then, showing my age, is you pick two tracks back at the tender age of middle school. You decide whether or not you want to go to the arts or whether or not you want to go to the science. And science is physics, chemistry, pure math, all of that fun stuff. And the arts are the literature, the history, the geography. Guess which one I picked. So I often tell people I don't know how to write, never a writer. I think of things, I think of the world in boxes and flowcharts and arrows. And I still think that there is something that leads to something else. And I think that's how I like to see the world. And that's how my parents have brought me up to see the world. I'm under heavy influence of my parents. They're both educators. And my mom in particular, I talked about it in one of the op-ed quite a while ago. She she came from a huge family, and her family moved to Hong Kong as refugees right after the war, and they lost everything, right? Just like you would think a refugee who settled in a new place, they lost practically everything, and so they survived, and they were able to get by because of the generosity of people around them, because of the Catholic Church, and that was practically it. And what influenced my mom's trajectory and how she raised me was that she always had really good grades. She was the third in the family, and she got full scholarship from the church and the school, and said, "Hey, we want to fund you to continue your education." And guess what? She didn't. She couldn't. Not because she didn't want to. She wanted to, but she couldn't, because being third in the family means that she had younger siblings. Having younger siblings in a big family when you're poor means that you need to go work and earn income. And that's what she did. And her and my two other aunts who were older. And because of that, my youngest aunt and my uncle, fifth and sixth in the family, they were able to continue their studies. My aunt got her PhD in Harvard, and that was it. She's been studying Alzheimer's. So it's interesting to look at that, and then project out to the world that we live in right now. We like to tell founders, you need to work hard, have grits, keep your heads down, and you get there. That's why we always tell people. And I always like to call BS. That's a huge part of it. But oftentimes you need to have that opportunity to even be that. And so that's where the 0 and 1 and the in between comes in. My brain works very binary, but somewhere in there, you need that additional element, outside influence, or life, we call it, to enable you to do what you do. And it's the same story I tell people. People often say, and oftentimes it comes from a certain group of founders, and they say, well, look at us, we do all these, we can get all these things done, just go and do it, or put your mind to it. And I'm like, well, it's not really that easy. I can't do what I do if I didn't have someone at home taking care of my children,
right,
when I travel, because I do travel like nonstop. I couldn't do what I do if there's not someone else taking care of health insurance, because in the US, that is like a showstopper if you don't have that. So there are a lot of things that we just like to look at the veneer of it and judge someone based on where they are. Oh, because they try hard, because XYZ. No, there's a little bit more to it than that.
I really appreciate the story. Like, as you're telling it, I think it resonates with many people who, like you just said, and I see this a lot in the tech industry, because it is that promise industry right now. Like, when you think of, I'll say, the prototypical American dream, or when a lot of people come to the West, it's like we're all on this, all of a sudden there's this even platform that everybody, kind of steps up to. And I had a leader one time who described it. No. It's like you got to join the Monopoly game, but it already started. So all the properties are bought and everything, and you've got to try to catch up now. That's the reality of it. So with that, though, that's your inspiration then, as you've written about these forgotten demographics. So tell me a little bit more about how that has shaped some of your writing and some of the work that you do.
It's in everything that I write and think about. So much so my kids would laugh at me, because every time I open my mouth, they're like, "Mommy, you're just going to spit out some, random stats about, people who don't have access to food or education or something." I'm like, yeah, it's important. It's from the first book, literally, right? Beyond Good, where we talked about the macroeconomic trends. We wrote that during COVID in 2020, looking at poverty, looking at longevity, looking at gender inequality, looking at climate crisis and who it impacts. I remember I did a whole research on day 0 in India, and all of that, and looking at what role does money play in all of these trends. So that was the first book. Even the second book, which is about metaverse, it's about it's about the tech, it's about the building blocks, but also it's about the people behind it. It's about the communities. It's about what it could enable in the future. And definitely in the latest book in AI, I wanted to write it. There's a funny story behind this. The idea came in London just during lunch, and I just had this thing. I'm like, something is missing. And then I was on stage with a good friend of mine, and he told me a story about his credit union, and about how a lot of the tools that are available for AI wasn't quite suitable for his members because they don't speak Western-based languages, and they had to go build their own stuff. They have to team up with their local credit unions to find ways to serve people who speak a different language than the tools that support. And that was the spark that I needed. And I just went full force on, okay, what does this AI world translate to if we keep telling people that AI is our future, and banking is very much going to be driven by AI and all of this? What does that mean to people who are not part of this world today? And that led me into a whole chapter about there are over 7,100 plus living languages being spoken and written by people today around the world. And less than 100 of these are supported by the open source data models. And so the question becomes, the majority of the people we're looking at in here will not and are not in that economy. They're not in that space right now. So if AI is learning and training based on the material that's in the digital ecosystem with those major languages, what happens to the rest of the people? If AI serves the people that understands the culture that it understands based on the people that it knows, again, what happened to the rest of the people? And that was the inspiration behind the last book. Is yes, it is not a new technology, and yes, it is still evolving, and yes, we are very excited about it. We keep pouring money into it, and every single day you see headlines and saying, breakthroughs, efficiency improvement, da 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 da. But I often go back and ask, what about the rest of the people?
Exactly. What I find interesting and again, we were just chatting over the last couple of weeks, both of us have been at tech conferences and kind of talking to people and credit unions and these organizations. There's, I think, an assumption that AI is a full book, right? That everything's in there. But if there's one thing about financial technology when it was sort of, envisioned, was to bring more people to the table, for example. So I think one of the challenges we've seen is it can actually be a barrier and can create more of that. And so as when you talk about AI and the fact that now we're training it with this base, what do you think some of the potential outcomes might look like, and what that future could be? And I guess, that's sort of the negative, but also if we were to embrace it differently, what could that potential look like?
Love that. That's the question I keep asking people, right? Is, are we focusing on the right things? Are we measuring what matters, right? Remember quite a few years ago when we all got so excited with fintech apps, and we said, oh my God, these apps are so cool. You can onboard people so much faster. I remember there were reports after reports that says, oh, you only need like 5 clicks. You only need like 30 seconds to open an account, etc. And then my answer was, okay, great. So what? So what? I don't go around and say, can I open an account? I go around because I need access to money to do X, right? The outcome, like you say. What is the outcome? The outcome is I need access to credit to expand my business. I need a place to save my money so I can grow and, plan for the future. There's always something after the open account. We get so excited with the open account that we forgot about the second part, which is, why do people need to open the bank account or a fintech account? And it's the same with AI. I see that. I get so excited when, you can use these generative AI tool to create action figures. I'm a geek. I was like, oh, that was pretty cool. You can use it to create video of like a cat that looks like a fish that was walking. My daughter was doing that the other day. I'm like, okay. And then so what? If you bring it into financial services, again, it goes back to what do people need and what are they thinking? What are they worried about when they're sitting around the dinner table? And I asked that very question recently. What's on people's mind? I can tell you what's on people's mind down the street. When I go to my little ramen shop that we always go to, we've been going to for years, for the first time, the owner, he said, I'm a little worried because look, it's Friday and it's empty. People are not coming in, right? He's
Mm.
worried about his business. I can also tell you what some of my friends are worried about because either their spouses lost their jobs because we're in DC, or they're worried they will lose their job. I can also tell you what I am worried about. I am worried
Yeah.
about, I have 2 children who are teenagers who in a few years, we are going to somehow magically get $1 million to put them in school because it's 500K a child to put through college in here, right? So that's on my mind. And so that's the outcome. I need something to help me solve that. The small business owner needs something to help them get to a safe place, right? And my friends, they need something to help them save and plan better against the backdrop of uncertainty. What are we doing? What can AI do to help us go from where we are today to where we need to be? And it goes back to intention. It goes back to, do we actually know what people want? And do we have the intention to bring technology, to bring data together to help them get there? Or are we just happy because it makes cute figures?
I love that. I think sometimes, and we talk about this in the tech world, technology can be fun. And, are we trying to, solve a problem, or are we our solution looking for a problem? And I think that's kind of part of it. So one more question for you. Throughout this journey, what surprises have you found along the way? Anything, any lesson or anything that's been kind of, oh, that really made me think, or.
Oh my God. So naive. I learned so much. So context, right? Again, I was blind, maybe. that might be a right word for it. So I was born and raised in Hong Kong. My mom worked, my dad worked, everybody around us, they worked and they have nannies. Fast forward to, when we moved to New York back in the 90s, and then, I started working and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Why is it all guys, right? Throughout different companies, software companies, telco provider, even like my team, back in 2000 something, I'm like, it's all guys. I would have 100 something people on my team. And I'm like, yeah, okay, so I can pick out number of women in 2 hands, right? It spans here, Tel Aviv, and India, and it's all men. And and then I had my first child. And then I'm like, oh, it's okay. I told my boss, I'm like, I'll take 3 months off, at the most 9 months sabbatical. I'll be okay. I'm going to come back to work. I'll go find a nanny. That was when reality hit, because it was not just extremely difficult to find help in here. It was also utterly expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And you couldn't find help to basically get through the day that we need as working parents, right? Doesn't matter if you're a mom or dad, working parent. So that was reality number one. That hit home. That was when everything came together. I'm like, oh, this is why so many people on my team are not women, because they ended up dropping out somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Childcare. And they somehow came back. But you know what happened when you take a gap in the middle. You kind of start over or start somewhere lower. So as we go up, you'll see the steep triangle.
Yeah.
And we keep telling women, just lean in. No. It's not about leaning in. It's about basically the structure does not support us going up. We just keep sliding down, not because we're not trying. We're trying so hard. I used to tell people, we're trying so hard. We're not like leaning in. We're tumbling over.
Ooh, yeah.
It is a reality, right? Don't celebrate mothers one day out of the year. Support us every single day. Have the caregiving infrastructure to support us, to help us be successful. And so that was reality number one. And then reality number 2. This is like still the 1 and 0, the techie mind that I had, which actually explain why I am where I am today. I was at the NGO working, and we did an ethnographic study in a city in the middle of the country. We had a lot of people coming in for the study. We had a group of 60-something-year-old. We had a group of 80-something-year-old. The idea was, and this is so Silicon Valley, the idea is technology can solve everything. We just need to find the right tech. We can solve it all. No problem. So I went in with that mindset, right? What technology do we need to keep older adults safe at home and to give their adult children a peace of mind when they go to work? That was literally my idea. I did not realize that was just a flawed assumption going in. Because after a week, what I learned, and it was very humbling, what I learned was that the adult children, those who are in the 60s or even 70s, they didn't want to work. They actually want to be home with their aging parents, but they couldn't because they could not afford to. They did not have the financial security. And then the 80-something-year-old, they really don't want to be living the rest of their lives, at home, homebound, or with something watching them to make sure they're safe. They want their independence, they want their privacy, but they also want human companionship. They want companionship from their adult children. And they couldn't get it because they're off to work.
Mm-hmm.
And after that study, and I remember this, I went in and I told my boss, I said, I'm going to make a switch. There are enough people looking at health tech, but there are not enough people thinking about how we can provide that secure financial foundation so that we can afford to look at health tech. It's not good enough. You go and tell people you need to exercise, you need to eat healthy, you need to do all these things, healthy living habits. You can't do that if you are poor. You cannot go and think about cooking healthy if you work 3 shifts and you get off the bus at midnight and the only thing you have in front of you is McDonald's, right? Not to pick on any fast food joint, but it is a reality for a lot of people. So for us to actually get to the point where we can help people live and age independently, you need to give them the financial foundation. To get this financial security that they need does not start at age 65 or 75. It starts way earlier, right? And that was my second, I think it was the most important lesson learned, is that we are not doing a good enough job to bring people in to give them the tools to succeed.
Well, with that, oh my goodness, I think, when I think about that, that just connects back to how we started. And with that, I can't believe we're at end of time. And I could talk here. I know you and I could chat probably for 3 hours. Maybe when I see you next, we will. But I do want to thank you for coming to the show, for sharing your insights with us and your knowledge. And I think that, just to leave it on the note, it is what's between those ones and zeros where those lessons for all of us do find. So again, thank you so much for joining me, Theo.
Thank you so much for having me, Karen.
Well, listening to Theo today and thinking back to that discussion that really sparked this whole episode about ones and zeros, it really is about that analog space. That's where humanity really lies down. And as we think about the challenges that we have in the future, we often do turn to technology. But I think we have to be reminded that that's a tool. And it really is what's in between and the reasons that we use those tools. We forget so easily that it is the human side and the public good. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining me again on the Disruptive Jam. And while you're out there, keep looking for those spaces in between. And I will see you next time.